Urban Extreme is a unique budget style racer that was published for the PlayStation 2 back in 2006, and this is more of an arcade focused racer that just really focuses on more simplistic arcade style racing, old school style racing, where you can gain access to a number of different types of cars, all with their own unique abilities and handling characteristics, whilst you also have access to a number of different tracks that you can race on. So the goal is to pretty much complete each of the races without receiving much damage, as if the car gets damaged too much, you will be destroyed and you'll end up being respawned back on the track, which can hamper your progress throughout the races. The one thing to note with this racing game, even though this is a PS2 title, graphically it's more like a PS1 title. It plays and feels very like a PS1 game. Now that's not such a bad thing, as the gameplay again is simplistic for what it offers, but it is a fun experience, although it can be a little bit fiddly and at times frustrating in terms of the controls. But once you master the levels and obviously a little bit of luck, you will actually have a fun experience. Now it all boils down to the type of vehicles that you decide to use. As I mentioned, each car in the game has its own characteristics. Some are easier to use than others, but they're all quite fun to use regardless. So if you're looking for something that offers a quick playthrough that does have simplistic but fun style graphics and visuals, while also has a pretty cool soundtrack to match the gameplay, this will be worth a look into if you're looking for something just for a quick run around. So it is worthwhile having a look. Car Racing Challenge was published for the PlayStation 2 back in 2005, and this game is a budget styled arcade racing type of game, but it's primarily story focused, as your task is to complete various missions all while progressing the story as such throughout the course of play. So you're a detective with the sole intention of trying to get from one point of a city to another area, all within a specific time limit, and you have to complete additional tasks along the way, where you do have to take out other drivers and collect items of interest so that you can proceed with the story. Now the gameplay itself is simplistic in its nature. It kind of gives you a style that's similar to Grand Theft Auto, if you're familiar with those games where you can drive around roads in 3D while also being able to jump out of the car at any time and run around the place until you get to a different car and steal it so that you can keep progressing until you reach the end of the level. Now you do have a time limit, so you need to make sure that you get to the goal before the time runs out. And as it's a budget title, it has its pros and cons. Like, it does have some good points about the game. The gameplay for the most part is simple enough to pick up. Each car has their own unique handling characteristics and speed. Some cars can take more damage than others, and you'll know that when you play through the game. Some cars are faster, and you can see that, where you can gain a lot more pace. But if you do too much damage, you will have to get out of the car as quick as possible before it blows up, and then have to acquire another vehicle so that you can keep moving forward. And you also have to deal with other drivers on the road alongside of the cops trying to chase you down. If there's one real negative to have with this game, is the longevity of the game, as this can be quite a long game to play, as there are only a limit of about 4 levels in total in the game, but each level will take you literally about 20 minutes to finish. And the problem with it is that with each mission you're literally just driving on a highway. That's all you're doing throughout the entirety of the game, even though it is a simple concept. But for most gamers, you will get bored very quickly. Now, it may not be to everybody's tastes, but for those that do like the budget type of games and want to explore something very different that has good ideas and good intentions, you could have a look at this. If you're into those type of Grand Theft Auto style of games, you might get something out of this, but for a lot of gamers, they will probably stay away because it's too linear in its approach, as there's not much else that you can do in the game apart from just driving on motorways, so it may not be for everybody. Captain Scarlet is a budget PS2 game that was released in 2005, and this game is inspired by the very popular TV show that was released in the 1960s, as it utilises a lot of the unique elements that would have been popular from the TV show at the time. Now, there are some drawbacks considering the quality of the game. Like, the graphics on the game are fine, but it is a budget title, and with that does come some limitations, as the overall quality of the game may not be as good compared to more mainstream games that would have been developed on the PS2. As the gameplay itself, even though it's fine for what it is, but it is very linear. Like, you don't play as the actual characters themselves. You end up just driving different vehicles throughout the game, and each mission varies from just getting from point A to point B, like racing through different sections within a time limit, or to defeating a number of characters or enemies within a level within a time frame as well. So it's kind of just rinse and repeat throughout each of the levels, and even through the campaign it just repeats the same type of missions over and over again. But as the story goes on, you do get access to a couple of different vehicles in which you can drive. Now, in terms of the story, there isn't really one as such for the game. You're just given missions and kind of snippets of information that kind of give some idea of a story, but there's no visual elements really or any intros or anything like that, so it is limited in terms of what it offers. Now, if you're a fan of Captain Scarlet, you could check it out, but for most gamers out there, it wouldn't live up to the expectations of the series itself, but it also wouldn't live up to the hype of a lot of racing type games or mission based games that would have been released on the system. There are better games out there. Extreme Quads is a budget style racer that was published on the PlayStation 2 back in 2005. And the gameplay focuses on off-road type of racing, where you control ATV style quad bikes with the intention to win races. And this game, in fairness, wasn't developed to a high standard. The tracks are very awkward to navigate at best, even though they are linear. But the computer AI, coupled with the track layouts and obstacles that you have to avoid, can leave it very, very frustrating to win races. And for most cases, some of the environmental hazards can leave it just being an absolute buggy mess, because when you hit anything at all, even if you hit a verge on the side of the track, it will spin the quad bike out on you. It's easy to see why this is considered to be one of the worst racers on the PS2, as it doesn't really have an awful lot going for it. The game will crash, it's not really well put together, and it really is one of those games that even if you saw it in a bargain bin, you're probably best just to avoid it altogether. Crescent Suzuki Racing was released for the PlayStation 2 in 2004, and this is a budget racing game that primarily focuses on championship racing with superbikes or motorbikes, where you race on various well-known tracks, all on high-powered motorcycles, and you race in different game modes from championships to time trials. And this game does have some pretty cool features on offer, and it's also developed by the same developers that also made GTR-400 and GTR Touring. And a lot of the main aspects of the game, like with the tracks and even some of the character models, are also used in each of those games as well. So a lot of the tracks you'll be racing on in the game, you'll be familiar with it from those other games. Now, the gameplay is very fast paced. Even though this is a budget title, graphically it is very good. It's definitely one of the better looking budget style of games, although it is hard to master. When you're using the bikes themselves, they can be quite twitchy to use, and it can take a while to get familiar with the control system and the gameplay mechanics, as you can fall off the bike very, very easily if you're not careful, or if another opponent on the track bumps into you, you will fall off the bike. But one of the better features in the game is the addition of a sidecar mode, where you can race and you have another character in the sidecar with you. And in this mode, it's a lot easier for people to get used to the racing physics of the game, as the controls aren't as twitchy because you have a lower center of gravity towards the ground, and you just feel like you have a lot more control over the vehicle itself, because you can use the additional character in the sidecar to lean in different directions to help to turn the vehicle in more precise fashion as you're going through the races. And it does have some very unique aspects to it that you wouldn't see in a lot of these type of games, and with it being more simulation focused, it is going to present a challenge. So if you do like these type of racing games, you can have a look at this, but if you're not and you're more into more arcade games, you may be better to look somewhere else. But all in all, it is worth a playthrough all the same. Classic British Motor Racing is a budget type of game that was released for the PlayStation 2 back in 2006, and this game focuses around racing around the streets of London and other areas around the UK, all in classic cars from popular British manufacturers, from the likes of Austin, Mini to Triumph and other well-known brands. Now you have different game modes that are on offer, and you can race different types of cars, from the likes of even a Mini Cooper even to more high-end type of cars, even convertibles, and you race around different variations of tracks, all from the likes of city streets even to like mountain cliff tops. As this is a budget title, it is also very familiar with other types of games that were also released by the same developer, all within that price range. The game itself now didn't get great reviews, and mainly due to the graphics and the limitations in the gameplay, as what was one of the biggest gripes about the game was the graphics and the linear playability style features of the game, as there's no real variations in the tracks. Each of the layouts can be quite long to get around, and they don't keep you really entertained for long periods of time. So as a result, a lot of people probably won't find this all that enjoyable to play for no longer than a few minutes at a time. Now, as it is a budget title, it is always going to come with those limitations, but it all depends on people's preferences. Some people may like it and it may not suit others, but if you do want to try something where you can gain access to classic British cars, you can have a look at this. Then if you're into more high-end racing games, then this wouldn't be the title for you. Action Girlz Racing is an arcade style racing game that was released in 2005, early 2006 for the PlayStation 2. It got a release on Windows PC and got a later port onto the Nintendo Wii in 2007. And essentially this is a Mario Kart clone. It tries to replicate the look and feel of the Mario Kart games, where you're racing against different opponents and you're using power-ups to take out your opponents throughout the course of play so that you can try and get an advantage to win the race. But aside from that, that's probably the best part of the game. Aside from it being a Mario Kart clone, the best feature of this game ideally is the visuals, as the gameplay mechanics and the overall playability of the game is very lackluster at best, as even though it tries to replicate Mario Kart, it doesn't do it justice, as the controls can be overly sensitive, the gameplay mechanics just don't feel as good as they could be, and you also have relentless and very frustrating AI opponents that use rubber banding techniques to a point that even though you're ahead in a race, they can literally zip past you at any moment whenever they feel like it. So if you're close to the finish line, you can literally have 2 or 3 or 4 opponents literally just whiz past you and cross the finish line before you've even gotten there. So no amount of use of power-ups or speed boosts can really give you any sort of an advantage in this game, as it's just really non-existent. And for those reasons alone, it's safe to see why it is considered to be one of the worst racing games on the PS2, and pretty much one of the worst racing games ever made, as there are better games on the system, so you probably would be best to avoid this. D-Unit Drift Racing is another budget style game that was developed and published by Phoenix Games in 2006, and this game, like its previous game in the series, Drag Racer USA, primarily they're essentially the same games but just with a few subtle differences in terms of the gameplay mechanics and style. This game allows you to race around multiple tracks where you can do laps, but the whole focus is on drift racing compared to its counterpart where it only focuses on drag racing, so it's just you're racing from point to point from start to end, whereas with this you earn points based off the amount of stunts and drifts that you can undertake with your car. So the more sideways that you can get, the more points you can potentially earn. So if you have more points than your competitors at the end of the race, regardless of the amount of laps you've raced on, you'll claim victory in the races. But like Drag Racer USA, this game graphically wouldn't be up there with the best looking of racing games, even though it is heavily inspired by the likes of Need for Speed Underground, Most Wanted and other types of tuning car games that were very popular at that time on the PlayStation 2. But it does offer some fun elements, even though the control system does take a little bit of getting used to. It does take a while to get familiar with the drifting mechanics, but once you can master that, you can have a bit of fun with it. Now, it's never going to be up there at the same level with other high quality games on the system, but what it does offer for being a budget game game, it does offer in short bursts, so you can have a look at it if you are looking for something just for a quick playthrough, especially if you are into these type of tuner car style games. This could be another one that you might think would be worth looking at. Offroad Extreme is a budget style racing game that was developed and published in 2007 for the PlayStation 2, and this game allows you to race with ATV vehicles and buggies. Now, as this is a budget racing game, it's definitely not up there with comparison to a lot of other mainstream racers that were very popular on the system, but it does have enough unique features that does warrant a few playthroughs. Now, the gameplay itself is not overly difficult to pick up and play. You will be able to master the controls and win races handy enough. The controls themselves now can be a little bit on the twitchy side, but if you can look aside that, there are some unique and full elements that you can have enjoyment with when playing. The tracks are open-ended and quite wide for the most part, so you don't have to worry about struggling to get to grips with the layout of the tracks, and you just have to try and collect power-ups and collectibles throughout each of the races to give you an advantage, where you can pick up various items from cash to repairable items, even to nitrous, to allow your buggy to go faster. And this will greatly help with winning races, as the computer AI can be sometimes quite difficult to overcome, but as long as you get a feel for the layout of the tracks and you time your use of the nitrous, you have a better chance of overcoming any obstacles that you face, and you can win races comfortably enough. All in all, not too bad of a title, and if you are looking for another budget friendly title that was released on the PS2, this is another one of those games that could be worth a look at. GTR-400 was released for the PlayStation 2 in 2004, and it also got an additional release on Windows PC. And this is a simulation focused style racer that has you racing in various championships, almost like touring car style events, but you're using exotic cars that reflect that of the likes of the McLaren F1 and other high-end exotic sports cars from that time that have been heavily modified for racing in mind, where you end up racing on the likes of well-known and professional racetracks that would be very similar to the likes of other games, the likes of the TOCA series or even the Formula 1 games. The only difference is you're racing with more exotic high-end sports cars, almost like Le Mans style cars. Now, as this is a budget title, it doesn't come without its limitations, but compared to most other titles on the system, graphically it is a lot better in terms of what it offers. There's plenty of modes that are available, there's enough depth in the campaign to keep you playing for quite some time, and also offers enough of a unique challenge and difficulty level to really test your overall skill set as you're playing through the game. Now, a Gran Turismo beater it is not, but if you are looking for a unique alternative to fill that appetite for the likes of those type of more simulation style focused games, this here would be another game worth checking out, as it does represent those features and it does have a lot of similar characteristics, although not as well refined, but it's still worth a playthrough if you are into these type of games. So here we have taken a look at a selection of some of the budget racing games that were released on the PS2. Now, there are some fun games on this list, even though not all of them would be to everyone's tastes, but they do offer some very obscure and unique features that would be worth a playthrough. It really just all boils down to your own preference as to whether or not you can get enjoyment out of these games or not, but I'll leave that up to you. And if you have any stories or any experiences regarding any of the games in this video, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on them, and if so, did you enjoy them or maybe not so much? Be sure to share them down in the comments below. And if you'd like to see more videos in this series where I do explore a lot more of these budget style racers that were also released on the PS2 back in the day, then be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to be updated when future videos are released. And in the meantime, if you would like to see other types of budget racing games that were released on the PS2, be sure to check out this video here on screen with more gameplay and reviews of those games. So be sure to check them out, and I will see you all over in the next one.